It was a time when the fog of despair hung over the land. The country was dying by inches. Citizen U presents The Great Depression and the New Deal. With Mr. Review. No fancy words, no fancy suits, plain talk about issues you need to know. Just in time. The Roaring Twenties, the age of ballyhoo. Who will ever forget it? Normalcy, returning to life the way it was before the Great War. Henry Ford and mass production, everybody could afford the Tin Lizzie, the Model T. The Harlem Renaissance, African American music and poetry and literature. Isolationism, the United States no longer involved in global affairs. The Scopes trial, putting evolution on trial. The world was changing. A modern age was born. Nativism. Don't come to America. It's for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants only. The Roaring Twenties. And what made it roar so much? A booming economy. Everyone seemed to be profiting in the stock market. It was never going back again. The bull market, everybody made money as the stock market increased exponentially year after year after year. What fueled the bull market? Buying on margin. Buying stocks on credit. Put 10% down, pay it back later with huge profits, seemingly guaranteed. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light. But then it happened. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. The Roaring Twenties came to a crashing end. Banks closed. Loss of confidence. All savings lost. People stopped buying. The economy collapsed. Unemployment? 25%. 1 in 4 working Americans looking for work. To add to the misery of the economic woes of America came an environmental disaster. A monstrous dust bowl covered the West. But what were the causes of this economic depression? 1. Farm prices had already declined throughout the 1920s. After World War I, farmers already faced a recession. Buying power reduced. Income inequality. Not everybody became rich in the 1920s, and the economy grew dependent upon luxury consumption. High tariffs. Government imposed high taxes on imports. This caused recession and depression in Europe. Without Europeans buying American goods, our competition was reduced. Easy credit. People in the 1920s learned that they could buy just about anything they wanted by just flashing their plastic. Sooner or later, they would have to pay the bills. And finally, the economists missed the signs. The candle was burning at both ends. Sooner or later, someone would have to notice there was danger on the horizon. Let's take a look at the cycles of an economic depression. Loss of confidence, stop buying, unemployment. Throughout history, this cycle would occur every 5 to 7 years. And how best to end a depression? President Hoover, when facing the Depression of 1929, said, "Economic depression cannot be cured by legislative action or executive pronouncement. Economic wounds must be healed by the action of the cells of the economic body, the producers and consumers themselves." What did this mean? How did President Hoover, a Republican, face the Depression of 1929? First, he provided loans to big businesses to try to prop up their employment. He provided the Emergency Relief Act, building roads and bridges, government-funded infrastructure projects. But you notice one thing missing in his plan. President Hoover opposed direct relief. He was a rugged individualist. He did not believe that individuals should receive help from the government. Needless to say, this affected his public approval. The Depression grew worse. Thousands of homeless vagabonds, hobos, rode the railroads cross-country. Shanty towns grew all over America. The indignity of it all, they were called Hoovervilles. The bottom of Hoover's presidency occurred when a bonus army marched on Washington, D.C. These were brave veterans of World War I, hoping for just a little help from their government. Give them their pension before it was due, to ease their pain. President Hoover refused to help. In 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in a great landslide. His personal story of fighting polio gave voters inspiration. If the great Franklin Roosevelt can overcome his depressions, so too can Americans. Roosevelt promised a New Deal. President Roosevelt's New Deal promised to help the forgotten man. How best to end a depression? Take a method and try it. If it fails, try another, but above all, try something. Franklin Roosevelt first offered direct relief. He came to America via radio in what he called his fireside chats. He talked informally about helping each and every American. Hundreds of new government programs were introduced. These alphabet agencies, as they were called, one by one, tried to provide relief to a depressed American economy. The FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, insured bank deposits, hoping to convince Americans to put their money back into those banks. The Civilian Conservation Corps, Roosevelt provided thousands and thousands of jobs to young people throughout cities and rural areas. Bring relief. Roosevelt said we need to bring recovery. But how? He set up the Emergency Banking Administration, trying to assure Americans that the banks were safe to invest in. The AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Roosevelt wanted to bring recovery to our farming industries, subsidizing commodities, encouraging farmers to do what they do best. The TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Roosevelt brought electricity into the South, establishing huge industries to help the American people. And ultimately, Roosevelt hoped to bring reform so no economic depression would be as deep and severe as this one ever again. He set up the Social Security Administration, a pension for all old people. The National Labor Relations Board. This encouraged unions, encouraged labor. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, a watchdog over Wall Street to make sure that no candle would be burning at both ends ever again. President Roosevelt became so popular, he was re-elected president 4 times. But did the Depression end? No. Roosevelt had many critics. Of course, the right, the Republicans, accused him of socialism, but he had his critics on the left as well. Huey Long, demagogue from the South, wanted to share the wealth. Everyone should have the same income. Father Coughlin, a radio pastor, said FDR was a tool of Wall Street and that the New Deal still protected big business. President Roosevelt himself overstepped his popularity when he attempted to pack the court in 1937. The Supreme Court had been blocking some of FDR's ideas. And FDR claimed, "Simple, I'll just appoint my own justices who will agree to everything I ask for." The American people thought Roosevelt had gone too far. Nevertheless, FDR helped to inspire stories of hope. Movies like The Wizard of Oz and great books like John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. So, what ended the Great Depression? What brought back our confidence? When did we start buying? And when were the unemployed able to find work? World War II ended the Great Depression. But what are the legacies of Roosevelt and his New Deal? 1. Government counted on to bring relief. Whenever there are troubles, whenever there are depressions, whenever there are problems today, the American people look to government to bring direct relief. Certainly, the size of government grew. As the government is counted on to do more and more, taxes and the size of government grew more and more. Roosevelt's political party, the Democrats, found a realignment as more and more Americans, like African Americans and union workers, voted for the Democratic Party. And finally, the recovery programs of the New Deal are still in place. Social Security, the old age pension, still exists. In fact, these entitlement programs make up a majority of the federal budget today. But how best to end a depression? They continued to come, 45, and even most recently in 2007. The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar on tomorrow. Citizen U presents The Great Depression with Mr. Review. No fancy words, no fancy suits, plain talk about issues you need to know. Just in time. The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar on tomorrow.